first establish where we up to, then. All right, so we are just above the middle of the page with Beis. The line starts with word Tchila. Okay, so we have a difficulty in understanding what we're talking about, or Kadmon, Nitzchi, and all that. So to begin with, we have to recognize what we are talking about when we talk about Oir. In addition to the difficulty of the concept itself, we are confused by the Oir HaShemesh. This is to us the primary reference. What is Oir? Oh, we have Oir HaShemesh. Thank you. And then Oir HaShemesh itself. We immediately translate it as Oir, not Shemesh. In other words, the Oir element is only the functional, the fact it acts like Oir. But actually it's a physical energy that emanates from the Shemesh, and it extends itself over millions of miles. And therefore it has nothing to do, it's not representative of Shemesh, of any kind of reality. It's just a candlelight is also a candlelight, is also a Oir. And in like manner, we are projecting. We say Oir Ein Sof means some kind of an energy emanating, and the fact that it's Ein Sof is altogether, that itself is perplexing. Okay. And therefore, we have to always remember the inyan that we speak about, we talk about Oir. And this is going to still come up, there's a whole Hemshech is talking about Oir. Our primary example, illustration of the concept of Oir, something that is closer to what we are referring to when you say Oir Ein Sof, much closer than the energy from the sun, is when we say that a person, a human being, as we discussed many times, has the properties representing the Creator. A human being has properties of truth, of reality. As we always point out, there's a fundamental difference between the human being and all other creatures. All the creatures are identified by their functionality. The human being is identified by his very presence. He is like Beis. This is the real thing. There could be a whole world of creatures, and it has absolutely no significance. One human being brings significance to the entire world. And we all recognize it, the fact that we recognize that human life is not measured, cannot be measured by functionality. A person, as long as a person is alive, even if functionally he's not able to do anything, we are going to be obligated, and we are going to be all instinctively going to try to preserve and prolong his life as much as possible, even though functionally he has got no contribution to the world whatsoever. Because his very presence is a reality itself. This is what a human being is. And the reason he's got this presence, this reality, is the fact that he was created by the Creator directly to represent the Creator in the world. Nas odom b'tzalmeinu kidmoseinu. The human being is his testimony, is the living and present testimony of the fact that the world is a godly creation. Everything else, you have to argue it out. You have to logically prove, oh, it couldn't have created it, so and so. The human being goes beyond that. This is godly. It's a godly entity. If one understands a little bit what the human being stands for, what kind of presence that is, you immediately will say that this is a godly entity. And therefore, to understand in Yonim on a deeper sense, the human being is a prime model for this, as is constantly. But now you see this. Nefesh Odom is the primary moshel for all in Yonim L'mayla. Etzem HaNefesh, Kochas HaNefesh, Machkifim, Pnimim, everything. So in the human being, we have the element of oir. Where do we have the element of oir in the human being? So we always explain it thusly, that the human being creates a domain. What does that mean? When a person owns a home, and owning a home, as the Gemara says, is a primary state of a human being. That is representative of the fact that he is a full-fledged human being. Odom she'ein Beis ein odom. So this home is his place in the world. He actually owns it. However, that understood in general terms, but on the relative sense, in the world, there is no greater sense of ownership than that of a human being owning a piece of property. That ownership is fundamental. God Himself attests to the fact that this is His. The Torah attests to the fact that this is His. So when a person owns a home, we have to focus in, just as when we spoke about the human being himself. And we clearly understand that human being does not stand for functionality. He represents reality. So too is his ownership of the home. Represents not functionality but reality. Meaning to say that the home is not just a place where he can put his things down, or he can have a bed to sleep on, or a place to sit. The home, this is his domain. And every last square inch of that home is his domain, and he is present in every crack and crevice of that home. And as we give the contrast, an example, that if someone would come into your home and would find a little corner in the basement or in the attic that you have never visited and you have no use for it, practically speaking, you don't intend to use it, and he'll climb into that little corner and say, I am staying here. This is not yours because you're not using this. What will be your reaction?
Get a gun.
Get out of here. What do you mean? This is my domain. Why do you mean that your domain? Clearly, we all understand that there is a principle of ownership that has nothing to do with functionality. Much superior to much functionality. this dominion is representative of the fact that the human being is for real. And therefore his ownership is for real. This is called Oyer. Oyer is representative of the Etzem outside of the Etzem. This Oyer is so profound and so powerful that a human being can own a piece of property thousands of miles away and they are 100% his. And he can acquire a piece of property thousands of miles away without even ever getting there. Hapidin, there's different ways of acquisition of land, of property. And when he does this kinyan, it becomes his 100%. Again, coming from a secular orientation, we are completely deprived of recognizing a principal truth. So we have to rise up and understand the world is a godly creation. The world is not a physical evolution. And it wasn't created by the Big Bang. It was intentionally created by the great Creator, by truth. And therefore this is truth. There's a true presence for the human being in the true, and yes, he actually can own property thousands of miles away, and they're 100% his. And if you go into that property that he has never treaded into, and you take and you cut off a heshina to use into your lulav, an arova, without his permission, it's gzela, and it's not, and you're not yotze mitzvah. He doesn't even know that he has it. And he doesn't care. But it's gzela and you're not yotze mitzvah. The interesting thing about this is that in gzela, if it's worth a pruta, you have to pay it up. If it's not worth a pruta, you don't have to pay for it. But if it's not worth a pruta, it's still gzela. You can't use it in a mitzvah, regardless how much it's worth. You don't owe him anything, and it's gzela. We have to project in our world on the basis of truth. Amit is himotze nimtze kol hanimtzoim. This is where Rambam introduces the whole Torah.
What was that again, please?
Amit is himotze nimtzu kol hanimtzoim.
What does that mean?
The truth of him, the truth of his presence. From this came all the creatures.
The truth of God's presence.
Yes. Amit is himotze. This is right in the beginning of the Rambam. It's not difficult to find. And I invite everybody to open this up and read it over at least 5 times.
In Sefer Mitzvot?
Not only in Sefer Hayat.
Sefer Hayat.
The very first paragraph.
Mishnah Torah.
Oh, Mishnah Torah. Oh.
Okay. So, having said that, and now as we have some kind of a sense of what we mean by what oir exists only by an etzem. Only an etzem has an oir. Like we always point out, an animal cannot own property. It's the stupidest thing when people when they bequeath wealth to animals. It's absolutely insane. There's no truth to it whatsoever. And everybody always says, well, the lions have their turf, they protect their turf. The lions can protect their turf. They don't own it. They protect it with their ferocity, with their power.
Ownership is the power the person has in himself.
Ownership is because a person was given by God ownership of the world.
The same human that was created, the dog was also created.
The dog was created to be an animal, and the human being was created to be a human being. It's true. Totally different creatures. Totally different creatures. And human being was created in a totally different manner. And when he was created, it was said, "Nasa Odom B'Tzalmeinu Kid Moseinu." It's a new, different kind of creature. It's not part of the mold of the worldly mold. V'yirdu, and he should rule with Gazayom v'Yashomayim. Please open the Chumash. That's what the human being is. It represents in his presence in the world, to rule the world. Pruvu milos oretz v'chivshua. This oir, the fact that a human being owns his domain, his home, is not because he claims it and because he protects it, but because of the reality of his presence. So this home is incorporated in his presence, in his reality. This is called domain. And this is the oil. This is the oil of the human being. The oil, an oil, as I said, it exists only by an atzmi. This is why I don't want to go far into it now. Oil Hashemesh, we have to understand correctly what we mean by Oil Hashemesh, because the generated energy coming from the Shemesh is not what Chassidus means by oil. And we will have many opportunities to talk about it in this Hemshech. Therefore, what does Oyer Yisef mean now? Since I went into this, I may conclude this discussion. So a human being can own property. So his home, that is his home, that is his domain, and in every, I said it's beyond functionality. It's just representative of him, the truth of his presence. Now, let us project a situation where somebody declares the Empire State Building as his dwelling. There's no human being that can relate to the Empire State Building as his personal dwelling. He doesn't have that kind of spirit. He can't relate to it. He can't perceive it. Dwelling means that this is where I live. This is representative of myself. Wherever I go, wherever it is, it's all representative of myself. That has to be a domain that he can conceptualize as his dwelling. The Empire Building, he'd get lost in it. I can't relate to it. Therefore, the oir of the human being is finite. It's limited by the sense, by his intellect, by how great he is. The greater the human being, the greater is his oir.
What is the definition of the word domain?
Domain is that which is which contains him, which allows him to be expressed to the fullest. That's means his domain. The home is the place where a person can express himself to the fullest.
Is it like to say that like his hand and feet is his domain, the same thing as a house? Like
no, I don't hear. Say again, what?
Hands and feet.
His hands and feet, hands and feet is not his domain. No, domain is outside of him. That which allows his hands and feet to stretch out, that's his domain. a person in a Shus HaRabim, Apidin, the Gemara says Apidin, a person in Shus HaRabim, Dal Adamas Shel Odom Koinesloi. Because a person perceives the Dal Adamas around himself as being that area that he occupies. That's part of his domain in a Shus HaRabim. That's a temporary domain. He cannot own it indefinitely. But property that he owns, his home is his domain, indefinitely.
So on the one hand, the human being is sort of infinite, beyond function, like those last minutes of a person's life.
But that infinity is finite.
That infinity is finite.
Because it depends on the extent of his intellect, of how great he is.
Why would it depend on intellect? Surely it would be based on his neshama.
Because he has
his
to,
neshama
he has to be able to perceive that he is present here.
The ownership is due to perception?
Yes.
I thought it was due to the reality and
The
truth of
reality
who he
is due to perception because he has the intellect.
Hmm.
The animal does not have a perception of ownership. And the human being does.
And that perception has a gift.
This is what he was given.
Uh-huh.
That's what the human being is. That's what the das.
And that das has a limit. He could not conceive.
So the human das has a limit because it depends on the spirit of the man. He has a limit, and therefore his das has a limit. And if you give him the Empire State Building as his dwelling, he's going crazy. He's not going to feel comfortable there.
Uh-huh. If he was a king, he could feel comfortable in a bigger dwelling. Or
A
no?
king can feel comfortable in bigger dwellings. A king also. A king's dwelling is beyond, so to speak. It has meshosim, has offices like the White House. Okay, it's not his dwelling. He lives there.
Right.
But all the secretaries, all the ministries are there. It's a completely different thing. It's part of his domain, really, in terms of the king. You know, all the ministers are all serving him, are presenting him.
So if a man owns would say one man would own the Empire State Building, like Donald Trump owns Trump Towers, okay, or Leona Hemsley.
No, so slow, quick.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So don't such people see?
You can own a property, but you cannot claim it as your dwelling. I'm talking about personal dwelling.
Dwelling is on the top floor only.
Personal dwelling. You climbs up onto the attic, or whatever it is, into what's called the
Penthouse.
penthouse, and
Right.
that's where he lives. He doesn't live in the entire place. Can I have some of this? Oh, that's for me. Thank you. The human being is, as you say, has an atzmi quality, but you have to understand, this is a created atzmi, representative of the concept of atzmi. He's not an atzmi in the true sense of the word. And therefore, that which was granted him, that's the reality that was granted him, that's what he has. Huh?
He's a limited representative.
That's right, a limited representative, yeah, of course. Of course. There's so much to speak about. I have to cut it short a little bit, particularly that we're going to be cut off soon. We pointed out that true ownership in the world for the human being, he has to be able to orient himself in that ownership. And if it is beyond his orientation, then it doesn't have that significance. For example, we all know that a wealthy person who acquired his wealth, and it could be enormous wealth, but acquired his wealth in a procedural manner, where it was developed by various investments, careful investments, and He was following through, and he became so to speak, astronomically wealthy. He can still relate to his wealth. Someone who is not ready for wealth, and wealth has kind of fallen into his lap, he can't relate to it. He remains the same pauper. And if he's going to use his wealth, it's going to be to his detriment. It's going to destroy him because he can't relate to it. This is all pointing out the limits of his reality. But as I said, the human being is a marshal. But some many can say it's a marshal for this union of oil. Oil inside, because we are talking about Atzmus, Hashem, who is limitless, and his perception has no limit whatsoever. His awareness is totally limitless. Therefore, the oil is inside. His presence is everywhere. Not everywhere because it has extended itself everywhere. Like the lion has claimed dominion, has claimed a turf, but because it is automatically everything. There is not that domain that's too large for Atzmus. Every last thing, that's what the Rambam says. Remember this, I mean, this is a different Rambam, but Tzitz brings down also that the primary recognition that we have to have of our Creator is that He is everywhere and He knows every little detail that is going on in the world. Yitus Kodesh here b'tabor haaretz. A small fly that is hiding someplace in the center of the earth. Nothing is too much for him to know. Okay, this is going to be our hakona for davening, and hopefully tomorrow we're going to be able to continue on with it. Put all these questions to rest. Have a good day.
So the Megillah reading will be at your house?
The Megillah reading in Mitzvah Hashem is planned to be in our home.
And we'll announce the time?
Yeah, the time. Essentially, whenever there is we may have a Ma'ariv also in the house, maybe not. But the point is, about 15 minutes after Ma'ariv is finished, people have to go home. We have to plan how we're going to handle with the kids because they have to be all Yates in the Megillah.